What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. And if you're one of the new subscribers, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm trying to grow the channel a little bit without being the obvious YouTube pandering whore, I guess. But I really appreciate those folks that like and especially that leave a comment. That lets me know, if they ask a question, it helps me figure out what to answer better and that sort of thing. And my whole goal here is to inspire other folks to try this because what I'm doing is it's not magic. It's just good old-fashioned craftsmanship. And if I can pass along some tips and inspire somebody else to give it a try, then go ahead. I've done this entire thing almost by myself, so it's not an insurmountable problem. And if you want an airplane bad enough, well, then just build it. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. Enough of that preaching. So back to where we left off, we're working on the tail spar mold. And what I've done is I dry fitted that foam spar. Now that will not be the spar, that's just a pattern. And I've laid it on the table here. Let's see if we can see. And I've just gone around and marked the inside and outside of where the spar is, that black line. There's a few lines on the table there, so might be a little difficult to see. And this is just MDF here that's covered with it's melamine or some kind of plastic wrap that's over it. And I just got it at Home Depot, bought two 10-foot sticks. And then I've hot glued that to the table. So this bottom section is done. It's glued in place. I had to miter one joint here. I sealed up all the edges with hot glue. And then I covered, these are effectively the sides of the mold. They're covered completely with packing tape. And you can see this center foam piece here. This is just the same foam that I made the pattern out of for the round part here. And it's just covered with packing tape and hot glued down. So nothing special there. And I've already started covering the inside here with packing tape. I'm sure you cannot see it, but the packing tape extends to about halfway through there and then up the side. So you want to make sure that you go through the joint and cover that with packing tape and not have a seam there. Even though I sealed it with hot glue, I'm sure it's not perfect. It never is. So that's cheap insurance to cover that with packing tape. And then these other pieces that form this edge of the mold, let's kind of get them in place there. Those have also been covered in packing tape. Now I'm going to hot glue those in place, and then I'm going to run packing tape, over this joint here on both sides, and then I'm going to run a smaller piece down along this seam here to make sure that it's completely covered. So the whole surface of the mold is packing tape. So if you didn't know that, you can take almost any shape covered in packing tape, wax it, put a release on it like PVA, and you can make a part that way. So for oddball one-off parts and even some larger parts that don't have a lot of features like this, there's only one round edge there. Everything else is straight. Pretty easy to make a part that way. So I'm going to get these glued down, get the packing tape down on the inside seam there and get these seams covered, and then I'm going to start waxing it because we're going to start the layup here pretty quick. Working on the spar layup now, and I put peel ply on the face of the mold over the wax and the release, and I use this 3M 71 spray adhesive to hold it in place. Now this stuff is made for infusion, so it dissolves in resin, which is great. So if you're using 3M 77, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You should be using 71. Anyway, peel plies down, and then I've got 2 layers of carbon down all the way in there. And next I'm going to start laying in the uni for the actual spar faces. So stay tuned for that. Morning, everyone. It's the next day, and the tail spar sat under vacuum for about 12 hours yesterday, and then I shut the pump off last night. Let it cure the rest of the way overnight, so I'm just demolding it now. And I'm pulling the peel ply off, and I don't know, it's really tough to see in there, but it looks like a good cure. So I'm going to pull this peel ply off, and then I'll pop it out of the mold the rest of the way, and we'll take a look. But I'm hopeful it looks good. We'll maybe get this bonded in today. All right. Okay, spar came out nice, and I've trimmed it up a little bit. I didn't have to do a whole lot, basically just trim the flange a little bit there. and then trim the ends to length there. So I've got it sitting in here and it fits perfect. I'm happy. I've already taken the upper skin and set it on there and did a fit check. That's all good. I've sanded the caps just a little bit, just to, I don't know, makes me feel better, but I'll come back and clean that up. I'll wipe all that down right there, and we're gonna bond the spar in right now. So this is going quick. And after that, I've got to, the ribs I made up the other day, I wasn't happy with the adhesion of the carbon onto the pink foam. So I'm gonna make up some more today and let that cure overnight, and then we'll get going on the ribs too. So hopefully we'll have this tail closed up in just a few days. Looking forward to it. All right, there she is, all bonded in. As you can see, you got a nice little joint there. Looks good there. So on this side, I cleaned up all the squeeze out here. I will come in later and put a couple tapes of carbon in there just for safety. Don't really have to, but it doesn't weigh very much. And again, peace of mind. So cranking right along. All right, it's a couple days later. I now have all of the ribs cut and bonded in place. They are not sanded to final shape yet, but they're fairly close. So I'll put the top stab mold on and then fit everything to shape before I obviously final close it. But they're all in, ready to go. Right now I'm working on this little bulkhead that goes down here. You can see there's a pass-through hole there for the tail linkage, and it fits pretty well. So that'll get bonded in here probably today, and then that gets taped in. And what I'm really waiting on is some more carbon plate for the elevator push rod horns. I ordered some, it didn't show up. The first set I cut, these guys, they're a little bit long. I don't like the way they fit in there. So I've been cutting some others out of this is just some infused Soric, and these are really not structural enough in my opinion, so I'm waiting for some more 4mm carbon. And let me grab one of the torque tubes here. So you can see the relief here for the torque tube. The torque tube is it's tough to do with the camera. All right, so torque tube goes through there. Elevator horn is gonna get bonded on there. And then you can see where the push rod will go through that center bulkhead there. So these are still a little bit long. I'm not quite happy with how these fit either. So again, I'm waiting on some more material for that to finish that out. So we're getting really close to closing the stab. Just another day or two, I hope, and then we can get it all closed up and out of the molds for good. Tail bulkhead is all bonded in, and you can see I've got to start on the clearance hole for the push rods. And that's just an approximate hole. I may or may not have to open that up, we'll see, but there's plenty of meat there, so I'm not terribly worried about having to make it bigger. You can see these are clearance holes for where the torque rods are gonna come through. And all the ribs are in, and it's basically ready to close with the exception of the torque rods. I'm working on that now. You might be wondering what these green balls are, and those are clay. And this is a method that I use to check the fit or the gap between the rib and the upper skin on a blind close. So once the upper skin is on, or even just sitting there not bonded, I can't tell how thick the gap is or if it's touching anywhere between parts. So what you do is you put these little balls of clay in there, you put the top half of the mold on, clamp it together, pull it apart, and then you can look at the gap and see that's left in the clay. And you can even measure that clay if you need to get a really accurate idea of how open or closed the bond line is. So I can see the aft ribs easily with the upper skin on, so I don't have to do that there. I already know that they're good. So I'm pretty sure the front ones are good too, but this is just the final step to make sure that when I close it, I'm not gonna have anything touching, and I'm not gonna have any excessive bond gaps. Now I'm shooting for around 1/8 of an inch. A little bit more is okay. So we're gonna throw the top half of the mold on right now and see how that looks. Okay, top mold is fitted on there, and we can take a look here before pulling it off. and kind of hard to see on video, but there's a nice little gap there. The important thing is you don't want anything touching. You want just a little bit of a gap for a bond line. So I don't know if I can get up in there to see, but there's about, maybe 3/32 of an inch there. And similar over here on this side. So that's all good there. Nice tight little gap to the top of the spar there. And a nice little gap up in there. So we're all good. So I've crushed it all down, I've clamped it at the tips. I didn't bother putting the bolts in because the mold is actually heavy enough to close it all the way around. So I'm gonna pull this top mold off and we'll take a look and see what the clay looks like. Okay, so quite a bit has happened off camera. I've got the spars glued in, the elevators right there, and you can see the horns are on. And I've got flash breaker tape over the hinge there. And the reason for that is I'm ready to close now, and I don't want the glue oozing out into the hinge and screwing up the hinge. So basically right now I'm just cleaning up all the edges. I ran a Scotch-Brite around, make sure it's all clean. Same here, ran a Scotch-Brite all around. I've got to wipe down the spar here, and then I'm going to start applying glue around the perimeter and all the touch points. And then we're going to smash it together, and that'll be it. Super excited about that because, man, I'm tired of building the tail. So that's going to go together, and then we'll get it all glued together, and then I've got to flip it over because of the way that the glue will sag as it's upright. When I flip it over, it'll make sure to make a nice fillet. Again, it's a blind close. I can't see everything. So basically up here around the leading edge, when I flip it, the glue will want to run in, and then on top of the spar, it'll run down to the skin. It's not going to run very far because it's going to be very thick, but it keeps it from pulling away from the surface. And then after that, I've got to close the bottoms of the elevators out, and then I can pull this thing out of the mold. So I'm gonna start mixing up some glue. Well, I apologize for not being able to show you more of the close, but sort of racing the clock there. And again, I'm working basically by myself, although I got my kids to help me flip it upside down. If I back up here, you can see that the thing is now upside down. So everything went perfectly fine, no issues there. I just got done basically tooling the edge there to make sure that's all nice on the root and the tip, and then can't really see, but inside there, the top of the spar, I got in there and tooled that, so that joint's all nice. I don't know if we can see in here or not, but the top of the spar, yeah, it's too dark, but top of the spar got good contact, good squeeze out there. So I think everything closed just fine. Not worried about that. So it's going to sit there overnight, and then tomorrow morning I'm going to close out the elevators, which they're already laid up. They're sitting right there. So I have to make up a couple small end ribs, tip and root, and then I'll close that. And then that means the following day I'll be able to pull the whole thing out of the mold. So very shortly you should be able to see this thing with the tail on the fuselage outside the mold, hopefully looking more like a real airplane. So stay tuned for that. Well, it's the next morning, and I had to clean the shop a little bit. I couldn't stay in it. It was pretty bad. So I cleaned off that bench over there, and then cleaned off this bench a little bit too. The underneath's a mess, but that's just what it is. But got the tools put away, all that stuff. Suddenly there's a bunch more room in here, and I can't quite figure out why. So actually, you know why. I couldn't wait. I had to pop it out. So there she is, out of the molds. And I couldn't be happier. Everything is very, very good. There's some cosmetic cleanup work to do, which is totally expected. The tail is incredibly stiff. The whole thing is very light. I haven't gotten a weight on it yet, but I don't know, I might have added maybe 20 pounds, maybe 25 pounds, something like that. But canopy is just sitting on there. Obviously the big hole there gets covered up by part of the canopy surround. So the next step is to get all the external seams joined and taped, and then I'm going to start fitting the canopy. So that's it for this video. Huge milestone. I'm ecstatic. Can't wait. I think it's sexy, but then again, I'm biased. So that's it for now. Stay tuned, and we'll be doing more stuff in the next one. All right, that's it. Later.